We're going to be talking to Max. Him, coming out of Israel. Max says that Islamic appropriation is the subject that you want to talk about. For example, Islam takes previous holy sites and makes them like their own, like the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. You're on with Apostate Prophet and Johnny P. Take us through it. Tell us a little bit more.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Hi. All right, so what do you have on your mind?
I just want to first of all say, I just want to say hook 'em horns. I'm a longhorn, so I just wanted to shout out, represent UT. I just wanted to talk about two related, interconnected points. Yes, so the Islamic appropriation of physical religious sites. Most significantly, as you know, I have lots of experience with the temple in Jerusalem. It's the holiest site in Judaism, and we see that Islam has played a political and religious war, against Judaism in terms of that, and contested, and not just Judaism, also too, we see with the Hagia Sophia and AP's homeland of Turkey. This is a big issue that I think needs to be addressed more openly. And also, too, not only that, but connected to that is the Islamic reappropriation of the modern political narrative, making it seem like the Palestinians are this oppressed native people fighting off the Israeli foreign occupier, when in reality it's the opposite of the truth. The Jewish people are the only people that are proven to have, proven to be indigenous to this region. And we see that the modern political narrative, especially pushed by lots of Islamists, is to twist that and to turn it on its head and to say that actually, no, the Muslims are the poor, oppressed people, and actually, the Jews are the foreigners. So it's very interesting how there's that twofold, cultural appropriation and also appropriation of physical buildings themselves. So I think that's a topic that should be addressed more openly. And what your thoughts are on that.
Well, let me chime in on this one first. As far as the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and places like that, it's not just people of Muslim practicing who are being affected by the Israeli state in that part of the world.
Well, actually, Christian Palestinians are less than 1% of Palestinians. So 99% of Palestinians are Muslim. So the vast majority of people are not, anything other than Muslim. It is 99% Muslim in the West Bank. So.
Well, independent of whatever the religious practices are, independent of whatever those religious practices, I want to go ahead and mute you because I'm trying to talk and I gave you an opportunity to speak, Max. But independent of a person's religious beliefs in that part of the world, there is a lot of contention over whether the practices of the Israeli government is, shall we say, just and equitable for the people on that part of the country. Apostate Prophet, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Max, for calling. There are separate issues that need to be addressed here. First off, the whole the Islamic appropriation of people's holy temples and values. This is indeed a fact. Islam started at its foundation by appropriating holy sites. And this is not something controversial. This should be known and more widely acknowledged. The holiest center of the Islamic religion is the Kaaba, for example, which is at the center of Mecca. This Kaaba was a temple belonging to the pre-Islamic polytheist Arabs who worshipped their own gods and who dedicated this temple like many other temples. The Kaaba was not unique. There were many other Kaabas in Arabia. This Kaaba was dedicated to certain gods that were worshipped by these polytheists. And the Islamic religion, established by Muhammad, established as a military force and a state in Medina, basically assaulted and captured this Kaaba, destroyed all the other Kaabas on the pretense that this actually belongs to the Islamic one God, Allah. So that is how the appropriation began. The destruction of all kinds of other temples took place throughout Arabia. Then it was said that the first temple after the Kaaba on the planet in the world was the temple in Jerusalem, which after the conquest of Jerusalem by the Islamic armies, was then conquered and turned into a mosque. Thereby, the whole Jewish value to it and the Jewish tradition was invalidated, and this was kept firmly with a concept of Islamic supremacy. alive for over 1,000 years. In fact, it is very well known that the Islamic Caliphate established a pact with the minorities within the Islamic Empire, especially with the Christians and Jews, who were forced to acknowledge that Islam is supposed to be in possession of the centers of religious worship, and mosques are supposed to be on the highest level, whereas churches and synagogues and other places of worship belonging to different religions are supposed to be low, and no new ones should be built. On the Islamic path of conquering the world, many other places, such as Max has pointed out, the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, was conquered and turned from a church or a cathedral into a mosque. So this is indeed a fact. When it comes to the issue of Israel and Palestinians, that is a whole separate discussion that I think would derail all discussions here, because it is very much a political matter. What I know for a fact is that the land belonged to an empire, to the Ottoman Empire. It was not a nation. There were people of different groups and ethnicities and religions living in this region. The empire was defeated in the First World War. The British took over this place, like many other places, and made an agreement with the Jewish population to establish a homeland there for all people. The Arab population rejected this deal, which is why they sought to take parts of the land and unite it with the neighbors like Egypt and Jordan, for example. But eventually in the 60s and 70s, they decided to instead go for an independent Palestinian land, which didn't happen so far. But that is a whole discussion that I think will overshadow anything that we want to talk about when it comes to culture and religion, and I tend to be a bit more careful with that.
Yeah, agreed. I think that the geopolitical situation in Israel is far more complicated than simply Muslims bad, Jews not bad. Not that you're saying that, but I just wanted to make sure that we're addressing that fact. What are your thoughts to what Apostate Prophet said, Max? And again, there's a delay, so I don't take the fact that you were over talking me to be like disrespect. It's just there's a delay, so I muted you. Okay, what are your thoughts?
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, didn't want to be disrespectful. Definitely wanted to let everyone speak. But yeah, no, I definitely, I wasn't looking at it more from like a modern political angle. I was talking about it from like in terms of like ethnographical, like in terms of the fact that the Palestinian Arabs are native to the Hijaz. Like Arabs as a whole are native to the Hijaz, and the Hebrew peoples are native to Canaan. So I just wanted to point out how that narrative has kind of been twisted.
Well, one problem that you have with that narrative is that the many people in the world who describe themselves as Arabs today know that they are not really Arabs. They are just culturally Arabs. They are not of Arab origins. They have just been Arabized due to the Islamic invasions and conquest. The Islamization of the people around the world also brought with it the implementation of the Arabic language as their mother tongue, and the imposition of the Arab identity, because it was seen as something superior. It was seen as belonging to the Islamic religion in the past, which is why the people of North Africa, East Africa, and the Middle East vastly adopted this whole Arab identity in the very beginning. So when it comes to who these people actually are, that's a very foggy, a very complicated matter that scholars have been debating about forever. But if we want to say, hey, Hebrew people are native to this land, which is why it should entirely belong to them, whereas the other people are not native to that land, first off, we don't know who these people actually are. We can't really go back and dig through their ethnicities for 1,500 years. There are many problems with that on an academic level. But if you want to use the same logic, you could do the same thing with many other issues in the world, such as you could talk about the Western European presence in North America, the Western European presence in Europe itself, because Western European people supposedly came from the Caucasus. You could talk about Hebrew people themselves. You could talk about how Arabs don't belong to the many places that they are today. So that is a discussion that is very, very complicated. I made a video before. I made a documentation of the Israel-Palestine conflict in which I explained that I very much think it is more complicated than it looks. It is also quite simple, actually. There was a conflict that took place about 100 years ago, and as a result of that conflict, the descendants of this conflict now take sides, and both of them only take the side that they take because they are descendants of a certain side within this conflict. No matter what we say, people will not change their minds about this. You could say this is 100% Hebrew land. You could say this is 100% Palestinian land, if you want to call it so. In the end, I'm not going to resolve the conflict. I don't think you are going to resolve the conflict. I just wish for the best.
Agreed. Any thoughts on that, Max?
Agreed as well. Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, I do think that it is important, though, to say that, like, for example, we see it in America with the Native American, people, that they have an indigenous claim to a piece of land. And of course, that's a separate discussion whether, people should have claims to land based on, ethnic belonging. But I do think that if, I'm not making that argument for Israel or for the Jewish people that we're superior or that we're better because we come from a certain ethnic group and Palestinians don't. I'm just saying that it is important to recognize certain basic truths in this world. And I think that a lot of times it's distorted and twisted specifically by Islamic apologists. And I think that this is one of the basic truths that the world needs to hear. And, I'm not saying that, whether or not that makes any religious claims or anything like that, but I think that it is a fact that should be spoken. I think that in a world where a lot of truths are not being spoken, this is one of the truths that should be.
There's one thing that I want to definitely agree on and add to this whole thing, which is that in the Islamic world, it is very common to support the Palestinian cause that is going on in this conflict. And the issue is what needs to be said, and I'm sorry to say this, but people mostly only support the Palestinian cause because they happen to share the same religion, because people also act very hypocritical about the Islamic appropriations of many other lands, including lands in North Africa and even Spain, Eastern Europe, Anatolia, and throughout the Middle East, actually. So there is a big religious partisanship that plays a big role in here. I agree that there is some big bias going on due to the fact that one religion happens to be very small in the world, while the other religion happens to be extremely, very highly populated in the world. Yeah. That is a part of the problem. But yeah, I mean, this is an endless discussion. But thank you, Max.
Right. Yes, and I want to point out, Max.
For having me on.
Good to have you, Max. I guess we'll let you go. I guess one of the things I wanted to add and to this is that people do talk about maybe an indigenous right to land or a cultural right to land for land that they're not on. A lot of times in this country, there might be that. I'm not saying that Max was saying this. Definitely not saying Max was saying this, but. Well, the Israelites, ancient Israelites, were on this land for claiming for many thousands of years. Therefore, these later interlopers have no legitimate claim. This is not what Max was saying, but some people might say that they have a divine right to it. But they seem to shift that burden. They seem to shift that entitlement when it comes to the land that they're on. Folks who would have no problem with Israel moving over onto the West Bank and moving other people out or putting them into different conditions are fine with that, but then they're not also giving up their land to maybe some of the native people of North America, because that would mean maybe losing the rights to their own homesteads. But again, it is a complicated issue. It's been going on for some time now. A lot of it, like you said, you hit it right on the head, AP. World War I and the breaking up of that empire, and the British deciding that they could solve it because they were the top empire at the time.
I mean, they gave up and said, "Okay, we are out of here. Do whatever you want."
Not the greatest moment in our collected human history.